Robinson Crusoe, Chapter 11. Robinson makes a tour to explore his island. Employed in basket making. I found now that the seasons of the year might generally be divided not into summer and winter, as in Europe, but into the rainy seasons and the dry seasons. The rainy season sometimes held longer or shorter as the winds happened to blow, but this was the general observation I made. After I'd found by experience the ill consequence of being abroad in the rain, I took care to furnish myself with provisions beforehand, that I might not be obliged to go out, and I sat within doors as much as possible during the wet months. In this time, I found much employment, and very suitable also to the time, for I found great occasion of many things which I had no way to furnish myself with but by hard labor and constant application. Particularly, I tried many ways to make myself a basket, but all the twigs I could get for the purpose proved so brittle that they would do nothing. It proved of excellent advantage to me now that when I was a boy I used to take great delight in standing at a basket maker's in the town where my father lived, to see them make their wicker ware. And being as boys usually are, very officious to help, and a great observer of the manner how they worked those things, and sometimes lending a hand, I made by this means full knowledge of the method of it, that I wanted nothing but the materials. When it came into my mind that the twigs of that tree from whence I cut my stakes that grew might possibly be as tough as the sallows and willows and osiers in England, and I resolved to try. Accordingly, the next day I went to my country house, as I called it, and cutting some of the smaller twigs, I found them to my purpose as much as I could desire. Whereupon I came to the next time prepared with a hatchet to cut down a quantity, which I soon found, for there was plenty of them. These I set up to dry within my circle or hedge, and when they were fit for use, I carried them to my cave, and here during the next season I employed myself in making, as well as I could, a great many baskets, both to carry earth or to lay up anything as I had occasion. And though I did not finish them very handsomely, yet I made them sufficiently serviceable for my purpose. And thus afterwards I took care never to be without them. And as my wicker ware decayed, I made more. Especially I made strong, deep baskets to place my corn in, instead of sacks, which I should come to have any quantity of. Having mastered this difficulty and employed a world of time about it, I bestirred myself to see, if possible, how to supply two wants. I had no vessels to hold anything that was liquid except two runlets, which were almost full of rum, and some glass bottles, some of the common size, and others which were case bottles, square, for the holding of waters, spirits, etc. I had not so much as a pot to boil anything except a great kettle, which I saved out of the ship, and which was too big for such use as I desired it, viz., to make broth and stew a bit of meat by myself. The second thing I would fain to have had was a tobacco pipe, but it was impossible for me to make one. However, I found a contrivance for that too at last. I employed myself in planting my second rows of stakes or piles, and in this wicker working all the summer or dry season, when another business took me up more time than it could be imagined I could spare. I mentioned before that I had a great mind to see the whole island, and that I had traveled up the brook and so on to where I built my bower, and where I had an opening quite to the sea on the other side of the island. I now resolved to travel quite across the seashore on that side. So, taking my gun, a hatchet, and my dog, and a larger quantity of powder and shot than usual, with two biscuit cakes and a great bunch of raisins in my pouch for my store, I began my journey. When I had passed the vale where my bower stood as above, I came within view of the sea to the west, and it being a very clear day, I fairly descried land. Whether an island or a continent, I could not tell, but it lay very high, extending from the west to the west-southwest, at a very great distance. By my guess, it could not be less than 15 or 20 leagues off. I could not tell what part of the world this might be, otherwise than that I knew it must be part of America, and, as I concluded by all my observations, must be near the Spanish dominions, and perhaps was all inhabited by savages, where, if I should have landed, I had been in a worse condition than I was now. And therefore I acquiesced in the dispositions of Providence, which I began now to own and to believe ordered everything for the best. I say I quieted my mind with this, and left afflicting myself with fruitless wishes of being there. Besides, after some pause upon this affair, I considered that if this land was the Spanish coast, I should certainly, one time or another, see some vessel pass or repass one way or other. But if not, then it was the savage coast between the Spanish country and the Brazils, which are indeed the worst of savages. For they are cannibals or man eaters, and fail not to murder and devour all the human bodies that fall into their hands. With these considerations, I walked very leisurely forward. I found that side of the island where I now was much pleasanter than mine. The open or savanna fields sweet, adorned with flowers, and full of very fine woods. I saw abundance of parrots, and fain I would have caught one, if possible, to have kept it to be tame and taught it to speak to me. I did, after some painstaking, catch a young parrot, for I knocked it down with a stick, and having recovered it, I brought it home. But it was some years before I could make him speak. However, at last I taught him to call me by my name very familiarly. But the accident that followed, though it be a trifle, will be very diverting in its place. I was exceedingly diverted with this journey. I found in the low grounds hares, as I thought them to be, and foxes, but they differed greatly from all the other kinds I had met with, nor could I satisfy myself to eat them, though I killed several. But I had no need to be venturous, for I had no want of food, and of that which was very good too, especially these three sorts, viz., goats, pigeons, and turtle or tortoise, which, added to my grapes, Lendenhall market could not have furnished a table better than I, in proportion to the company. And though my case was deplorable enough, yet I had great cause for thankfulness that I was not driven to any extremities for food, but rather plenty, even in dainties. I never traveled in this journey above 2 miles outright in a day, or thereabouts, but I took so many turns and returns to see what discoveries I could make, that I came weary enough to the place where I resolved to sit down for all night, and then I either reposed myself in a tree, or surrounded myself with a row of stakes set upright in the ground, either from one tree to another, so as no wild creature could come at me without waking me. As soon as I came to the seashore, I was surprised to see that I had taken up my lot on the worst side of the island. For here, indeed, the shore was covered with innumerable turtles, whereas on the other side I had found but three in a year and a half. Here was also an infinite number of fowls of many kinds, some which I had seen, and some which I had not seen before, and many of them very good meat, but such as I knew not the names of except those called penguins. I could have shot as many as I pleased, but was very sparing of my powder and shot, therefore had more mind to kill a she-goat if I could, which I could better feed on. And though there were many goats here, more than on my side of the island, yet it was with much more difficulty that I could come near them, the country being flat and even, and they saw me much sooner than when I was on the hill. I confess this side of the country was much more pleasanter than mine, but yet I had not the least inclination to remove, for as I was fixed in my habitation, it became natural to me, and I seemed all the while I was here to be, as it were, upon a journey, and from my home. However, I traveled along the shore of the sea toward the east, I suppose about 12 miles, and then setting up a great pole upon the shore for a mark, I concluded I would go home again, and that the next journey I took should be on the other side of the island, east from my dwelling, and so round till I came to my post again, of which, in its place. I took another way to come back than when I went, thinking I could easily keep all the island so much in my view that I could not miss finding my first dwelling by viewing the country. But I found myself mistaken. For being come about 2 or 3 miles, I found myself descended into a very large valley, but so surrounded with hills, and those hills covered with wood, that I could not see which was my way by any direction but that of the sun, nor even then, unless I knew very well the position of the sun on that time of day. It happened to be my farther misfortune that the weather proved hazy for 3 or 4 days while I was in this valley, and not being able to see the sun, I wandered about very uncomfortably, and at last was obliged to find out the seaside, look for my post, and come back the same way I went. And then by easy journeys I turned homeward, the weather being exceedingly hot, and my gun, ammunition, hatchet, and other things very heavy. And we'll go on with chapter 12 in the next video. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment below. Thanks so much for watching. I love you guys. As Tigger says, ta-ta for now.